What's up, everybody? So today I want to talk about why I think critics of Brushy Bill Roberts are getting it wrong when they look at the affidavits that Mr. Morrison used to prove that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid. Now, the soundbite you'll hear is that William Vincent Morrison, Billy the Kid's lawyer, was able to provide 5 sworn affidavits signed by living witnesses that personally knew Brushy Bill Roberts as Billy the Kid. So that's a soundbite. You'll hear me say it. You'll hear other people say it. And as I watch, people direct me to things. So they'll say, hey, you should check out this guy's video, or hey, you should look at this post on the Billy the Kid forum, or any number of ways I get information. And I love that. We're all on a journey, and we're all looking for evidence and trying to find the truth. And so I think that people that are genuinely trying to investigate the story and make a decision one way or the other, I think it's great. And I always have high hopes, right? So I don't have to agree with everybody, but as I look at things that people find, I have high hopes that I'm going to learn something new, or I'm going to find something that I haven't found before. And unfortunately, what I see people do, and I get it that not everybody's trained in this stuff, but there's some very common mistakes that people make that I just want to talk about for a couple of minutes. The first one, which is very common, we all do it, is projecting on the past our understanding of today. And so, although it's true, we all understand that, Billy the Kid didn't have a Facebook page. We know he didn't have a Twitter handle. We know he didn't drive a car. When it gets to the more granular things that we take for granted, we assume for some reason that those things have always been the same, and that the meaning of words don't change. Well, the meaning of words does change. I mean, if you grew up when I did, you'd watch the Flintstones. The Flintstones had a gay old time. I don't think that means back then what it means today. And there's a lot of different examples of that. How, if I say, wow, I think you're really cool, it doesn't mean I'm talking about your temperature. Obviously, it means I think you're relevant, you're fun, whatever. So how you use the word defines the meaning, and how people use words over time definitely changes. So this is a good example, for example, Mr. Morrison being a lawyer. In the 1940s, Mr. Morrison had a legal firm where he provided legal services. Maybe you'd think about it today as like a notary place where you go get your car tag done or whatever. But he provided probate services. He was a paralegal. I reference him as a paralegal in one of my early interviews. And he's very clear. He was not a member of the bar. So he was Billy the Kid's lawyer. But he took Mr. Roberts to a law firm, Lipscomb, Petticolas, and Andrus, and they helped prepare the petition to the pardon, and they represented him to the governor of New Mexico. So these are legal proceedings. And so when you talk about the affidavits, you hear a lot of things from some folks that I think get it wrong, and they'll say, oh, affidavits don't really matter. Well, it's a legal instrument, and it's the proper protocol you use to get a sworn statement from somebody. So it's a sworn signed affidavit. So just where, as in you're in court, you raise your right hand and you swear to tell the truth. When you're giving a statement to a notary and you sign a sworn affidavit, that is your testimony. And there are consequences, obviously, if you lie to a court or lie to the governor, whatever, under oath. And so these are legal instruments that people use. Mr. Morrison appropriately used these instruments. Now, that doesn't mean people don't lie, right? People lie in court all the time and say they didn't kill people and they didn't rob and they didn't this, and they're totally lying. So that's a separate issue, though, from trying to dismiss the actual instrument of an affidavit and say affidavits don't mean anything. But we'll get to that in a second. The first thing is putting on the past the understanding of today. So that's the big mistake that a lot of people make. The other big mistake people make are logical fallacies. And so if you want to go on the internet and search, you'll see lists and lists of logical fallacies. So a lot of them, we're probably familiar with, like circular reasoning is not a legitimate way to process information. Attacking the person and their character is not considered an appropriate way to process information or deal with an argument. So there's a lot of different things, and I'm sure I'm guilty of them. Most people are guilty of them, but you'll see as people present their data that they fall into a lot of logical fallacies that aren't really legitimate. So let's talk about these affidavits. So there was 5 affidavits, and he says they were from living witnesses. You have to remember that this was a legal matter in 1950, and these people were alive, meaning they're available to testify, they're available to be interviewed, they're available to share their story with the governor. So these are living witnesses at the time that are available to meet with the governor. This petition for pardon was the beginning. So people look at the evidence packet or whatever and say, oh, there's nothing here. That was just the beginning. That was just to get the conversation started. You don't just go meet with the governor and as a big hoax and a big thing. I mean, they have a staff that kind of vet these things and look at the evidence and say, okay, there's enough here to have a meeting. And then you meet with them, you talk about it. And then if there needs more investigation, you can provide more evidence. But Morrison was trying to get in front of the governor and try to get a hearing, an audience with him to start the process while Brushy was alive. So it was the governor that turned it into a media circus. It was the governor that didn't handle the matter appropriately and threw it out and brought a bunch of reporters and things and turned it into a circus. That was not done by Brushy Bill or Mr. Morrison. So again, the context of what's going on is very important. And the affidavits were a part of the petition for pardon. So you've got 5. One of the criticisms I hear are people saying, well, only 2 of those people actually knew Billy the Kid when he was Billy the Kid. And that's true. So they'll say it's a fraud because, these people didn't even know him. So what's the point of the affidavit? Well, that just tells me they're missing the point of the affidavit. If you want to know the testimony of the people in the affidavits, just read the affidavit. The affidavit tells you what their statements are. And so if I meet someone who is, well, I have a personal example. I actually met some pro hockey players. I was a waiter at the Cracker Barrel restaurant many years ago, and I waited on some pro guys. And they introduced me to some other guys and said, hey, this is so-and-so. They played with me in the New York Rangers. And it's like, oh, cool. Wow, that's cool. What position did you play? When was this? Whatever. And they're talking about, hey, remember that game when this happened and that happened, whatever. And so, I don't know the guy. I've never seen him play hockey. I actually hated hockey at the time. But, this guy plays. I have his hockey card. And he's telling me that this guy played on the team with him. So got it. So if years later he's trying to get a pension and they were to come to me and say, hey, did this guy play for the Rangers? Or he's claiming he played for the Rangers, I would say, well, as far as I know, he did. I mean, this guy introduced me to him and said he did. I mean, he claimed that they were on the same team. Everybody referred to him by the name that we're talking about. So, I mean, yeah, that's my understanding. That's what they're swearing to in regards to Brushy Bill. These 3 people are saying that we knew him as Billy the Kid way before he came out. And so Martil Abel, her husband, knew Billy the Kid as Billy the Kid, introduced Brushy as Billy the Kid. And so that's what she's saying. So there's no hoax here. There's no we're trying to pull the wool over your eyes and we're trying to make it into something. It's not it's slam dunk evidence. It is what it is. It's a testimony of someone who many years prior to Brushy coming out said that I was introduced to him by somebody who should know as Billy the Kid. DeWitt Travis said his family knew Billy the Kid. And this, I could go on about this one because there are things in Brushy's story that are a mess. His genealogy is a mess. But I'll tell you this, a lot of genealogy is a mess. I have a relative, Charles Newland Edwards. I have his grave. There's a very ornate gravestone with a tree trunk carved out of stone with a scroll on one side, scroll on the other. So this man lived to be an adult. He got married. His wife is buried right next to him. There's no record of this guy. I know he's related to me. I know he's in the family tree. I don't know where. He's actually, I think, referenced in the family Bible too, but I don't know. There's no record of him in the census. There's no, military records. There's no nothing. So there's a lot more people, dead people, than we have records of in the census and in these other places. Ben Roberts, the person that Brushy Bill said was his grandfather, there's a lot of dead Ben Roberts. You can find a lot of graves for Ben Roberts in this period, but when you try to match them to historical records, there's not enough historical records to go around. Just because we have a big digital footprint today, we didn't have that back then in the 1850s. And so a lot of people were under the radar or off the grid. So another example, Oliver Pleasant Roberts' parents. Okay, so Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson was supposedly his dad's second wife. He had a first wife, whatever. So they find them, and then whenever you look for James Roberts and Mary Adeline Dunn, they don't exist. So it's like, well, you're lying. They never existed. Well, now go find Brushy's grandparents. So find Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson's dad and find Brushy Oliver Pleasant's dad's dad. And then if you found them and they had a complete record, you could see, did they have any kids named James, which could have been really Brushy Bill Roberts' dad. Well, you can't find that family. It stops. So yeah, you have his parents, you don't have their parents. And so there's just not a lot of data on some of this stuff. But what I can tell you, and this is what brings us back to DeWitt Travis's affidavit. In his affidavit, he says that his family always knew the Roberts family, including James, Billy the Kid's, or just Brushy Bill Roberts' dad, and said that his dad, DeWitt Travis's dad, and Brushy's dad served in the Confederacy under Sul Ross. Well, I found that record. It's in my book. And so there was a James Roberts and Ebert Travis in the same unit under Sol Ross. And it was a very unique thing because Sol Ross usually commanded other regiments. And in this case, he commanded a regiment in Texas. And so there are records that seem to support that there was a James Robert and that the Travis family knew the Roberts family. So anyway, you take the affidavit at face value, and all he's saying is that, yeah, we knew that he was Billy the Kid since I was a little boy. And I liken this to, growing up, I had buddies in school, and they'd say, my Uncle Vinny, he's in the mafia, don't tell anybody. And then you find out, Uncle Vinny gets arrested, charged with racketeering, and he really was in the mafia. And so it's kind of like that, everybody and this is a logical fallacy, by the way, appealing to the everybody can understand with common sense, but it is kind of true. Everybody has somebody that about that does something that you're not supposed to talk about, and then later it comes out and you're like, well, I always knew that about them. I always knew there was something going on there, and that's what's going on here. But let's get to the two people especially the one person that did know Billy the Kid as Billy the Kid, and that's Severo Gallegos. And this is the strongest evidence. So yes, it's not as strong to ask me if this guy played for the Rangers as opposed to talking to the general manager of the team who literally signed the contract with the guy. But we have someone like that. We have Severo Gallegos, knew Billy the Kid intimately, lived in San Patricio. Billy the Kid visited with him, had many meals with him, did target practice with Florencio Chavez in his yard. When Billy the Kid was in the Lincoln County Jail, he would visit him and bring him berries every day. When he escaped from the Lincoln County Jail, he said, hey, Severo, grab a rope, grab that horse, bring it over. And he helped him escape. So this is a very strong piece of evidence. And so what do? They commit a logical fallacy by saying, kids don't remember anything. I have a kid, I tell him to clean his room and he forgets, and so that's settled. Okay, we've settled that one. Everybody can be confident that that's settled. Well, you didn't settle anything, because you say so. We should now just dismiss this sworn affidavit from this guy. Or they'll say, well, he was too old and old people don't remember things. Okay, so that's settled. We know that old people don't remember things. We can all agree on that. So it's fairly ridiculous to take that approach on these types of matters. You can say that that's a possibility. Certainly, you can say that, perhaps he was bribed, perhaps he was hypnotized and reprogrammed. Like, you can say all kinds of things, but to just say, okay, we're done, we proved that. And what they do is they'll take the 40, 50 different items of evidence and one by one say, wow, it really does seem overwhelming in the beginning. But once you go through really and you look at each one, it's really not convincing at all. This is wrong, that's wrong, this wrong. But wait a minute, you said that's wrong because kids forget things. And so done, settled. We never have to talk about that again. We've proven it. And so these guys do victory laps on things that aren't settled at all. If it was settled, we wouldn't still be talking about it. So I think that they misunderstand. First of all, they commit logical fallacies, number one. Number two, they project the understanding of today back into the Old West or the 1950s, whichever it may be. And three, they're assuming, because they don't understand the mechanics of how this stuff works, I guess, that these things are supposed to say things they don't say. If you want to know what they say, you just read them. It's not that hard. Anyway, this is my opinion on the affidavits for William Vincent Morrison. They are evidence. You don't have to like them. You don't have to accept them, but they are legal evidence in a legal case. And again, this was the tip of the iceberg. They had Brushys' teeth in the trunk. I have the letters that say, bring the teeth. We're going to get a denture made. We're going to show people Billy the Kid's teeth. There's a lot more here. This was the first meeting. You don't bring everything. You bring what you think you need to move the process forward legally. And he had a bunch of other affidavits he didn't bring. And so we have copies of all that stuff. So that's why I think they get it wrong. And again, no hard feelings to anybody. We're all on a journey here to learn the truth, but that's my opinion on the 5 affidavits. Thanks for watching.